Hi, I'm Adam from Truth. In this series of videos, we'll be sharing some recent case studies. All the cases we're using are based on actual recent clients we've helped you with. What links all the clients in this series is the fact that the solutions we found for them made their lives better, but their cash flows worse, hence beyond cash flow. In this series, we'll be taking a look at some of the many ways in which Truth can be used to look beyond just cash flow and help deliver fantastic outcomes for a wide array of clients, not just those looking to improve their cash flows. In this video, we're going to look at how to model equity release in Truth. The interesting thing about equity release from a cash flow modeling perspective is that it's always going to look like a great idea. Giving the client more liquid capital will always make their cash flow look better. What this means is that we need to be particularly aware, in equity release cases, of the knock-on effects elsewhere. Meet Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill are a couple in their mid-60s. They have 2 children, both of whom have technically long since fled the nest. I'm sure you all have clients in this situation. As we can see, they've got some modest savings, they've got a healthy pension fund, which is adequately funding their lifestyles. Other than that, most of their wealth is tied up in the family home, which they own outright. So Jack and Jill have got 2 kids called Bob and Jane. Bob has been made redundant during lockdown and has asked them for some temporary financial support in making ends meet. They want to be able to help, but they don't have much in the way of capital available. Jane isn't asking for anything but has 2 kids of her own in private school, and in the interest of fairness and to avoid future disputes over their estate, Jack and Jill want to give an equal sum to both children in the hopes that the second child would put it towards expensive school fees. So let's take a look at how we can help them. As the title of the video suggests, the solution we're going to look at for Jack and Jill uses equity release. An equity release or lifetime mortgage in Truth is quite simply a mortgage with no servicing payment that won't be redeemed during the client's lifetime. If they'd already taken out the equity release contract, we could put an amount outstanding over here on the right hand side. In this case, we're going to assume that they're about to take out the equity release, but they haven't just yet. I'm going to put it in the description, and I'm going to choose a borrower. In this case, I'm going to choose joint. I did some casual research this morning, and I'm going to opt for a middle of the road interest rate of 2.5%. As I mentioned earlier, we need this mortgage not to be redeemed during the client's lifetime. In this client's case, we're projecting up to age 100. So we can simply specify a redemption date of the client's age 101 by pressing C in any date field, in this case the redemption date, choosing the lead client and entering age 101. When we click OK, that date will appear in the redemption date field. Next, we need to take care of the loan coming in, which we're going to do via payment history. In this case, we're going to look to release £200,000 of equity from their £800,000 property. So I'll input a loan in the immediate future of £200,000, and of course this will be a single payment. I'm also going to specify a type of loan. In this case, it's a moot point because there's no repayments going to be made. And that's effectively all we need to do in this mortgage. Whenever you create a new item in Truth, you'll see this message asking you to check the what if settings, and this is a great example of why. We don't want this equity release mortgage to impact on the client's current position. We want to be able to show them the before and after picture. So we want to ensure that we have a scenario ready to model that equity release. In Truth, you'll always have 2 scenarios, the current position and one what if scenario. In this client, we've already set up a scenario called equity release. So let's make sure this hypothetical mortgage only features in the equity release scenario, not in the current position, by unticking current position on the what if scenario tab. We could also achieve the same by using the scenario view option on the fact find, and again ticking the scenario that we want our equity release mortgage to feature in. If you'd like any more information on creating what if scenarios, then our level 1 training webinars are a great resource. I will include a link in the video description below. So remember I mentioned earlier that equity release always makes clients' cash flows better. Well, Let's take a look at their cash flow before equity release. So this all looks pretty good, really. They have adequate liquid capital to meet all their lifestyle goals and see them through to age 100. Now let's have a look at what equity release looks like. What's not to like? We can see here there's an immediate injection of £200,000, and again we could compare it to the current position. So £200,000 equity injected into their cash flow, and this is money which in the current position is tied up in an illiquid form, namely their main residence. But of course they aren't keeping the capital, it's going to go to the kids. So let's account for this money leaving their cash flow by inputting some expenditure. Now obviously we could input separate gifts, one to each of the children, one to Bob, one to Jane. What we're going to do in this case is just input a single gift to kids, and I'm going to input it as a joint gift on the same date as my equity release contract for £200,000. And again, I'm going to specify that this is a single gift. Again, we're going to be asked to check the what if selection. What we can see in this case, because we've set up the item in our equity release scenario, it's automatically excluded from the current position. Now let's go back to the cash flow. So as we have £200,000 coming in and then we're taking £200,000 back out, it's now looking identical to the current position. Of course, we could have gifted a lesser amount to the kids. We could have put some money into a gift and loan trust. We could have shown Jack and Jill blowing the money on a series of wild holidays. The important thing is that this recommendation is now effectively cash flow neutral. It has no impact, either positive or negative, on their cash flow. But this series is called Beyond Cash Flow for a reason. So let's take a look at what happens to their net worth. Let's go back to their net worth in the current position. We can see from the lifelong chart in the bottom right that their property is trending slightly upwards. In this case, we've assumed an inflation rate of 2%, and if we open up their main residence, we can see there's an assumed future growth rate here of 3%. Remember this, it'll be important in a few moments' time. If we were to right-click on the property bar at age 100, we can see that the property at that point is worth about £1.1 million in 30 odd years' time. We can also click on the calendar on the left-hand side and jump to the projection end to see a full breakdown of their assets and liabilities at that point in time. One important thing to note is that their net worth is about £1.5 million and there are no liabilities in the current position. Now let's look at what their net worth looks like in our equity release scenario. So the eagle-eyed amongst you will probably already have noticed from this lifelong net worth chart down in the bottom right, there is a growing liability, which of course is our equity release contract. I mentioned a moment ago that the 3% growth we're assuming on their property was important, and here's why. A £200,000 loan secured against an £800,000 property is a loan-to-value ratio of 25%. If the property continues to grow at 3% and the mortgage interest rate is lower than this, remember we used a figure of 2.5%, the loan-to-value ratio will go down over the remainder of the client's lives. So let's have a look at age 100 in this scenario. We now have a property worth £1.1 million and a loan for £240,000. They actually have more equity in the property in 30 years' time than they do today, about £860,000. And in terms of loan to value, this is down to about 22%. Of course, if these rates were the other way around, the loan to value ratio, and so the debt they're potentially leaving behind, will go up. If our property grew at 2.5%, the loan to value ratio wouldn't change. But let's have a look at what happens if this is the other way around. If our property grows at 2.5%, and our mortgage grew at 3%. This time at age 100, they have less equity in the property, about £660,000. And the loan to value ratio is up to almost 30%. But let's set this back. So we want to assume that the property grows at 3 and the mortgage grows at 2.5. Remember that none of these changes are having any impact whatsoever on our client's cash flow. If we were to produce a report for Jack and Jill which just looks at their cash flow, they wouldn't be able to see the value of our recommendation. Here I've taken a blank report and added a chapter called My Recommendation. We don't need to go into report design in detail, there's already videos on our YouTube channel which cover this. The important thing here is that we need to include something in our report which conveys to the client the impact of their decision. Let's drag in a copy of the detailed net worth statement. Right-clicking on this will bring up the properties for the statement. I'm going to call it Net Worth, Age 100, Current Position. I'm also going to change the year for which the report is printing to age 100. Let's also add in a copy of the lifelong net worth chart. Now let's do the same for our equity release scenario. Again, I'm going to right click to bring up the properties, and this time I'm going to call my report Net Worth, Age 100, Equity Release. And again, I'm going to set the age for which the report prints to 100. Let's also drag in another copy of the lifelong net worth chart. This time we're also going to change the scenario for which these reports items are printing by ticking the equity release scenario for both of these last two items. I've also included some explanatory notes here about our recommendation. While the report prints, let's take a moment to look at what Jack and Jill wanted to achieve and how we helped them. They wanted to help their kids but didn't have any available capital. So we created a hypothetical mortgage with no repayments to illustrate the impact of equity release. We then gifted the equity to the kids, making the exercise cash flow neutral. Having done this, we found that the best place to show Jack and Jill the impact of their decision was the net worth statement. We also used this to show them the impact of the long-term assumptions we might make about property growth or the equity they might end up leaving behind. The key thing to remember here is that the cash flow statement isn't really the be-all and end-all. There's a million and one ways in which you can add value for clients to reassure them, to empower them to make informed decisions about their financial futures, which don't necessarily revolve around that single cash flow capital chart, as we can see in this report. So my snippet of explanatory text at the end just notes that, according to these assumptions, they could end up leaving around £240,000 less to the kids if they were to go for this equity release option. I hope you found this video useful. Keep an eye out for the next entry in the series, which should be coming along in the next few weeks. If you haven't already done so, you can click the subscribe button below to ensure you get notified of any new additions to our channel. Thanks for watching.